Welcome into Mock Trial Masterclass, your guide to controlling the courtroom. I'm Luke, and I want you to be a mock trial master. And in today's episode of the Mock Trial Masterclass Podcast, we're going to talk about how you can do just that. You know, the funny thing about the mock trial world is that it tends to be mostly dominated by lawyers. It's lawyers who oftentimes are directing these competitions, who are running the organizations that handle mock trial. And so with that, it is natural for a lot of people in this world to be very good at understanding what it takes to be a great attorney. That's certainly the category I fall into. I was an attorney in every mock trial round that I ever competed in, and now as a coach, that is my bread and butter. Unfortunately, what happens sometimes, and I'm sure so many of you listening to this have experienced this, the witness side of things sort of gets left to the side. And whereas you might have attorneys who are locked in and know exactly what they're doing, you have witnesses who maybe their only strategy is just sort of be likable or smile at the jury or say something funny and maybe they'll remember you. When in reality, the teams that succeed at the highest levels of this competition and win national titles have witnesses who are locked in at the same level as their attorney. And so what we're going to be digging into is this episode is how to make that happen for you and for your team. And our guest today is someone who, unlike me, honestly, sometimes knows exactly how to get that done. It's former All-American witness and current coach of Notre Dame mock trial, Simeon Lawrence. Welcome in.
Welcome. Thank you so much, Luke, for having me in. You know, I love mock trial. I can't get enough of it. You know, my team, we weren't at the national championship, so I am very happy to get back involved with it, talk to you about it. So thank you for helping me feed my drug.
For sure. So what we're going to dig into in this episode is I really want to hit witnessing. Are you one of the, I kind of cringe sometimes when people use witnessing as a verb. How do you feel about that?
No, witnessing perfectly works for me.
Okay. So witnessing, we're going to go through today in really three major areas. And those of you who've been listening for a while, we've done a lot of witness content on Mock Trial Masterclass and the coaching videos and the podcasts. But I really want to dig deeper than probably what we've ever done before. And so we're going to do that in three phases. We're going to talk about, first of all, creating a witness character, what it looks like to develop a memorable character and persona for a witness. We're going to talk about coaching witnesses. And if you're not a coach, don't tune out that section because we're going to have great material for you coaches out there, but we're also going to have tips and tricks for you if you are a witness to put into your practice routine. And finally, we're going to talk about carrying it out. What does it take on game day to be a great witness? Let's start at the very beginning, Simeon, with creating a good witness character, because this is an area that you look at the teams that are really good at this activity and they're totally locked in as it comes to creating a witness character. And so I just want to start off by broadly asking you this question. It's a loaded question, but I just want to let you talk and hear where your mind goes. When you get a witness statement and your team has decided, okay, we're calling this witness, we're calling, Johnny Martin or whoever, where does your mind immediately go when you start reading that witness statement?
As soon as I start reading the Johnny Martin witness statement, I'm thinking of a character that I saw on TV. I'm thinking of a character that I saw in a movie. Does Johnny Martin, does he seem spontaneous? Does he seem intelligent? Does he seem like a go-getter? Because we have so many different movies and television shows where people are paid at the highest level professionally to make us laugh, to be a character, to be the best at it. So a lot of times people in mock trial, they get a witness and they want to follow what that witness is doing in that statement. I think the opposite. I think you take that statement and then you try to place it on somebody that you've seen before, whether it's a Drake Bell and Drake and Josh. Everybody, he's a funny guy. You can watch a lot of them and he relates to a lot of mock trial characters. David Spade, Chris Rock, Wanda Sykes, those are all actors who are really, really good at what they do. And they're very talented at it. And the mock trial writers are really, really good at giving us good content that we can create with it. So that's the first thing. You're writing your P points, your D points. But then that third thing is the whole time you're thinking, who does this relate to where I'm going to be able to study? where I'm going to be able to, outside of practice, watch somebody that I'm envisioning this character being and get better when I'm at home away from the team. So that's the first thing I'm thinking of when it comes to creating that character.
And I'm curious, and I want to talk even more about this later when we get into coaching and developing your characters once it's sort of set in stone. But do you have an acting background? Because you're talking about studying these performers and sort of taking in what they do and applying it to you. Are you a theater kid, or is this just a mock trial skill you developed?
See, I've always been a public speaker. So it was always trying to hit the audience where you're not focusing on one subgroup, where you could hit a majority of the audience. So I had background in that, but I never was able to do theater, unfortunately, in high school, just due to doing sports. Because, in theater and, of course, with mock trial, you're doing 4-hour practices, 6-hour practices.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I'd watch them and be jealous I couldn't. But when college came along, I had the opportunity. So no background in acting and theater, but, it's always been something I was super passionate and loved.
So you look at the witness statement and your mind goes, okay, who are some TV characters this relates to? Who are some actors I love that this relates to? And then once you lock in on that, it becomes time to say, okay, how are we going to make Johnny Martin, to use my example or whatever? How do we fit that into that character? And so what makes a good character in mock trial? Because and that is a loaded question, because you have different types of witnesses, right? You have your experts, your sort of main characters, who some would call a dramatic witness, right? The victim, the plaintiff in a lawsuit. And you have the sort of quote unquote character witnesses themselves. But generally speaking, what makes a good character for a mock trial witness?
I think the number one thing that makes a great character witness, or any witness, I'd say, is concentric circles. Delois Leapart, my professor at Northwood, that's one of the first things I learned in mock trial. Concentric circles, and this is my explanation of it. She probably has a more professional one. But if you have all these circles like a Venn diagram, and every Venn diagram represents someone's age and someone's background and someone's ethnicity, and they all cross at one point, what can you make this character into that's going to hit that very middle of every single scenario? So there's times where there might be a funny joke that, say, a 22-year-old might find funny, a 30-year-old might find funny, but that 50-year-old jury member might not find funny. So those characters that you're able to find something that's going to hit all concentric circles of the jury members that we see, because, as we know, AMPT is great with, making diverse juries, so we really see a whole different groups of people, but what character and what content is going to be able to reach all of those groups of people? And a lot of times those teams that don't have successful witnesses and they don't succeed, those witnesses are sometimes stuck in one comedic sense that only hits certain subgroups, where the ones that exceed are hitting a wide variety.
Well, and I think a trap that a lot fall into is, instead of actually making your characters likable, they just sort of become annoying.
Right. Yeah. And I heard on the podcast you did with Luke where he said, you don't want to be up there filibustering when you're on cross or direct, where you're just rambling off something you want to avoid fully.
So let's dig in further to this idea of concentric circles of the Venn diagrams by breaking it down by witness type, because it's a broad idea just to say, well, here's what makes a good witness character. So let's break it down. Let's start with the main character witnesses, or the dramatic witnesses. Again, this is going to be your defendant in a criminal trial. It's going to be your plaintiff in a civil trial, the victim in a criminal trial, assuming that the victim is still alive, maybe the family member of the victim if the victim is dead. What makes a good main character dramatic witness character?
You got to be Tom Brady with finding your points with being sad, finding your points with being mad, finding your points of remembering something good, and then bringing that out on the director cross, where you could be all sad and boohoo and like, man, Mrs. Martin, she was so good to me. And then they mentioned the cake that she used to cook, and you say, oh, yeah, and that cake was so good, because you're showing the jury a multitude of different emotions. A lot of defendants or someone who's a victim, they're going to stay sad the whole time. Now, being sad, we might be engaged for a few seconds. few minutes, but it's not going to last and give you the impact. So you got to display different emotions when you're that defendant and that victim, so you're not stuck in what that jury's assuming. You want to show them the good times, the bad times, of course, the impact that's going to come. And of course, you don't want to be annoying with it. And it helps to switch your emotions because you're not staying stagnant. You're not giving yourself a chance to become annoying or to becoming a nuisance to the jury. So I think that's a huge part, especially when you're blessed with that kind of witness role.
And I love that because I've heard others talk about the idea of an emotional arc, right? It's not just you're not 100 the whole time, but you're also not 0 the whole time. And you can't see me because this is a podcast, but it's like a wave, right? There's ups, there's downs. One of my favorite dramatic witness characters that I ever had a hand in was one of the years I was competing at Belmont. We had a witness who was a former teacher, and this witness was friends with someone who had died, and she's talking and sad about that. But then she goes into talking about, I'm a teacher and I'm with kindergartners, and she lights up and she's talking. She used the phrase, all the busybodies in my classroom. Is that sort of what you're getting at, where you got to have sort of the broad spectrum of emotion? It's not just linear.
Exactly. Broad spectrum hits for everything. You have to be able to show the jury that you're a person. You're a person who's getting asked questions, and you're in a scenario, and you have to live it. You have to. I know that we train this for hours and hours, but once you're in that seat, and once you're giving your statement, this is brand new to you. You're not in court all the time. You have to, when your crossing attorney gets up there, you have to assume they're your friend. You're not automatically assuming that they're coming at your throat until they give you a reason to. You have to find those points.
How you feel about crying?
Oh, if you can do it good, you're gonna score well.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could do it. I feel bad for the attorneys who cross a witness who can. But I do. I love the fact that AMTA gives our witnesses the opportunity to express themselves in ways not many of us can. So for those witnesses who can cry, shout out to them. But the same thing with using an accent. You have to be able to do it good. You have to be able to perform.
And that's a good question to follow up with, because you bring up an accent, and I think we all know what a good accent sounds like, right? It's consistent. It sticks around for the entirety of the direct and the cross. What does good crying look like? Because I feel like even on my own team, I have seen it done brilliantly, and I have seen it done where I am sitting in the audience and I have coached this student that is on the stand, and I am cringing, thinking, Luke, why did you set this person up for this?
Yes, I understand. And there has to be practice. And I'll tell you what, practicing crying is no joke. I think what makes a great crier is everything you do with your body outside of the crying. So you could sit there and you could cry, and you could be still, and you could sit there and cry. But then you could also find a point to look at and shake a little bit, and have to catch your voice as you get to that cry, and then have to have your attorney calm you down and enter into the cry. There's many steps to it where you have your body emotions. If you're making eye contact with the jury the whole time, when that crying moment comes up, you're not looking at the jury, because you're giving the jury time to look at your body and look at what you're doing, where you're showing your acting skills. So I think with crying, it's not the cry that scores, but it's everything that you're doing with your body during the cry that's going to separate you from the others.
And then alongside that, I've heard people talk about how you want your biggest emotional point of that arc to come at the point of your case where you're selling your biggest factual points. My sort of contention with that is we don't want to bury the lead. And what I mean by that is, if it's a murder trial and the first witness we're calling is the mother of the person who died, it shouldn't take us 6 minutes to get to, oh, by the way, that guy at defense counsel table killed my baby boy or my baby girl. That needs to be the first thing that is said. but we also can't be over the top crying at that point. How do you balance that?
Yep. So I feel like, well, with your situation, there's a specific method for it. But if we're taking the broad approach to it, if we need to get it out early, then we're getting it out early with the first three questions. As soon as you get up there as that witness, if you're really trying to be that All-American, that 10 score, when you're looking at defense counsel and looking at that defendant as someone who suffered at their hands, you're looking at them the whole time. You're angry with them the whole time. And then that attorney it's their job to ease that situation. I think the whole room should know that defendant had something to do with you before you even say it. I think that's going to separate you a lot. But with that, with your attorney getting that first three questions out, establishing that that defendant had something to do with you, turn it back. Bring something in that brings it back to a happy time. So it's not an immediate switch, but it's gradual. It's gradual getting back to this person. So as a character, and we're showing those other emotions.
And see, with that, my attorney gears are turning now to you start there and you can come back to it later with the emotion and ask it differently, get into different, probably more specific details to where now we can have the full range of the emotion. And I think that's brilliant. When they get on the stand, they shouldn't have to say anything for you to be able to know they've had it with that guy or that gal sitting over there.
Yeah. That's what makes a great performer.
Let's move to expert witnesses. These tend to be, I think, the easiest ones to characterize. I would say just they need to know their subject well. They need to break down the hard stuff, make it easy to understand, and they need to have some energy, some passion about them. What would you add to that list?
Well, that's a great list to add, and I wish a lot of kids in AMTA used it all the time. It would make for a great viewing. But on top of that, of course, a down to earth and not ready to fall on the sword for whatever is inside of your investigation. A lot of times AMTA kind of sets witnesses up where, oh, well, I kind of think it's this, but I can't conclude that. A lot of times our witnesses fight it fully, but I do think that there is a very almost scientific way to letting the jury and the crosser know that, hey, I can't conclude that. But from all my study, it leads to this. There's a way to get that out, but a lot of expert witnesses struggle with falling on the fact that, hey, I think this is real. I want to fight this for my case and die on the stand for it, versus let me give this up and get my points. So I think,
and with that, you mentioned a second ago, I wish all the AMTA kids would
yes,
follow that framework. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see from experts?
Number one mistake is trying to win the case on the stand. At the end of the day, you got three different witnesses on your team. You account for a certain amount of points, but those points are accounting for, the win or the loss. I saw on another podcast you did how you mentioned, that nobody's going to jail.
Yeah.
at the end, there's no check mark at the end of our ballots that say, who do you think won and who do you think lost? So I think the biggest mistake we see people make is they try to win it. They try to win opening, close, and the whole case in chief on cross or direct. And it's not needed. Give us what you need, make sure it's good, and then get out of there.
So then let me give you this scenario. You're an expert witness, you're on the stand, and just like every witness statement in mock trial, there is some bad fact that you're going to get crossed with. Experts, like you mentioned, tend to have a tendency to really want to fight that because it's less of like, if you're an eyewitness and you saw something bad happen, it just kind of happened. You're stuck with that. But as an expert, if we're within the four walls, this is an attack on you and your credibility as this character. So how do you handle that on cross-examination? I get up and I point out some legitimate, significant flaw with your investigation.
So if it's, and this is huge, when it's a question, and you're going to run into this as an expert witness, when it's a question where you know that you're going to have to say yes, you're going to know you're going to have to say no, you're going to have to get that answer out, but you're also going to have to throw a little bit extra on there. Now, you don't want to throw too much on there where they're going to have to redirect you and say, I need a yes or a no, but you want to give enough where you confirm their answer. But then you also throw a little bit of, your opinion on why that answer might not be, fully conclusive. So you're asking me a question. I'm forced to say yes. And I'm like, well, yes, I could see why you'd say that based on the data, but based on X, Y, and Z, this is why I believe this. That comes off a lot nicer. You're not attacking that attorney who's crossing you, but you're still getting out your side. And in the notes, you might see a judge say, good fight.
Let's move on to character witnesses, which it's always it's a weird phrase to say the character witnesses, but what we kind of mean by that is they're not the main characters. They're not police officers. And they're not the expert witnesses. They tend to be eyewitnesses. They saw or heard something. Maybe they know someone involved in the case and can add some sort of character testimony. But these guys tend to be the ones that if you're not locked in, it's easy to score 5s and 6s. How, Simeon, do you keep that from happening?
Man, I'll tell you what, as a character, it would argue that it's one of the easiest roles, but in my opinion, I believe it is one of the most complicated to be good at roles. I believe as a character, you have to get up there and everything you do before you get on the stand, and especially even after you get off the stand, because if you're good enough, that jury is going to be looking at you in between rounds. They're going to be looking at you during other witnesses as they're going. And a lot of times, when I was competing, and I'd be on the plaintiff or prosecution side, I would always, be kind of worried because I'm like, oh, they're going to forget about me as a witness, So as a character, you have to find a moment that's going to make you unforgettable. And the one hack that I realized with AMTA that I always see works well is, unbeknownst to the witness that you're portraying, self-deprecation, unbeknownst to them. So a lot of times with my witnesses, I'd say something about, oh yeah, if I'm a taxi driver, I'm not saying that I'm a taxi driver first. In my intro, I'm going to mention, I'm like, yeah, I focus in on the transportation of people all throughout the cities of here, and here, and make it a complex thing. I'm really proud of it. And then my attorney's going to bring me back and say, well, what's that job? Well, I'm a taxi driver. So jokes like that, it always opens the jury a little bit to begin, and it's likable. Who doesn't like the person who loves their job, but it's not as good as a job as it's supposed to be?
Well, and what I want to point out about what you just said is it was a joke, but it also wasn't a joke. And what I mean by that is there wasn't some line, right? In the same way that, when you're sliding into someone's Instagram DMs, you should just leave the lines alone.
Right.
You need to leave the lines alone as a witness. And I think I put this line in my book, which is you want to be funny, not say funny things. And when you're designing the character itself to be funny, the taxi driver who thinks he's a geographer, world traveler, right? That just is funny. There's no elbow zinger at the end, right?
Exactly. And that's the humor that we have. That's the humor that I constantly see working in AMTA, and it's always funny. And then I'm waiting to see a new one, but I love this one now.
So where are the best places to sort of find the humor? How much of it is I comb through the witness statement and, oh, they gave me this detail, that's funny. And how much of it is you take some leeway within the bounds of where you can be with invention of fact, and I'm going to add this little detail that's going to create a funny moment?
Yeah, I think the first 40 lines, maybe 70 of a mock trial witness statement is have fun. They throw a lot of willy-nilly in there. And I think that, in AMTA, all of our teams, I have never seen a major objection to one of those intros that a character's doing. Of course, don't invent, but have fun with what they're saying. I wouldn't follow it by the book, but we're having fun here. Find something about that witness that you could stretch a little bit. And, if it's good enough, no one's going to really be bothered by it. So I think you have that leeway when you start off.
Where are your favorite places or areas within a witness's character to find those moments? The job is obviously one of them, right?
Of course, I think the intro is great. I would say you hit hard in the intro and then you slow down. I think our rule at Notre Dame is 2 to 3 jokes to start it off, and then you're coasting, and then after that you maybe have one more. That's it. And when we say jokes, it's not the elbow taps. It's that natural joke that comes out that the jury's going to get. That's hitting all those concentric circles. And then I think the biggest separation for a witness in that character development and in planning those funny moments is on cross, because everybody in the country plans the direct jokes. Everybody in the country plans on what they're doing when they get up there for that direct. Not a lot of people plan that cross. So you could find pockets when you're going through your affidavit, and when of course you're going through the tournament circuit, where I'm going to get crossed on this. No matter what, I'm getting crossed on this, and that's it. If you're not planning to have your character on that cross, then you're leaving that whole character on your direct. You have to plan to bring that with you, and I think that's when the jokes hit the hardest.
So the character itself that you're developing for a character witness, we just keep saying that word over and over again, goes beyond simply humor, right? You want to have some sort of defining trait, some sort of defining characteristic for your witness character. Typically that comes out to be, we're going to put a hillbilly up there, or we're going to put the drug dealer up there, or whoever. Does it always need to be a sort of stock 2-dimensional character, or can you go beyond that, or should you not go beyond that because the stock characters are just easier to understand and score better?
Yeah, no, I think when it comes to characters, I think the range is endless. I've seen a lot of teams really, really get creative with their characters and jump outside of the norm. Whether it's whether it being a bug collector, there's all kinds of different things that teams bring in that's outside the norm. But when it hits across those concentric circles, it's going to be good. So you have to be wary when you get down to the orcs and regional seasons, how I'd say generic or 2-dimensional you're going to be, because you're running into tough competition. So at those points, I think you have to switch it up, see if you can get creative, bring something new into the fray, because you're going to be going against competition who is doing just that.
And so we've talked a little bit about the character development, reading the statement, where your mind goes. But once you've looked at those TV characters you were talking about earlier, once you start writing the jokes, where do you go from there to set things up as far as maybe developing the script for a character witness?
So developing the script is huge. In my experience, it's always been a lot of one-on-one. So you get with your attorney. You and your attorney come up with this rough draft. I know a lot of times, teams get together and as teams, they come up with it. But you have your directing attorney, you're the witness, get together, grind it out. And I think the most important piece after developing that script is the different eyes that you have on that script. So you're bringing in alumni. You're reaching out to people who aren't in mock trial. With me, I had the benefit. I played on the football team at Northwood. I live with football players. So when I'm in mock trial season, I'm running jokes by those guys, seeing what they think about it. And if it lands with them, okay, it landed with these guys. Let me call my mom, see what she thinks about it. Let me call my mentor, see what they think about it. People unrelated to mock trial, if it hits with them, it's probably going to hit in the courtroom. You have to ease it up a little bit so it still has rapport, but find other eyes to look at your work.
Well, and that goes back to the concentric circle conversation. It's proving that you fit those circles, right?
Right. Correct. And it's so crucial to do. It stuck in our cult of mock trial, and you're with the team in the classroom grinding it out. Get other people's advice. Jump out the bubble a little bit.
That's great. Putting in that extra effort can really make a big difference. We're going to move on now to talk about coaching witnesses. And again, this is not just advice for coaches. This is going to include some practice tips. If you're a witness listening to this, what you can do between kind of where we're at now, talking about developing the script, between that to competition day, what you can do to set yourself up for success. One of the things you can do to set yourself up for success is to just learn about mock trial and how it works. And that's why Mock Trial Masterclass exists. There's a ton of content on YouTube and on podcasts for you to dig into. You can also pick up a copy of my book, Mock Trial Masterclass, which dives into really everything you need to know to get started and then develop beyond that as a mock trial competitor, both as a witness or if you're listening to this as an attorney. I call it the championship plan that anyone can understand because it's not written by a college professor, and that's a good thing because you're going to be able to understand it and read it and enjoy it. And if you want to pick up a copy, you can do that by clicking the link in the description on YouTube or in the show notes on podcast platforms. Simeon, I started this podcast, or at least early on, I asked you, are you a theater kid or are you an actor? And the reason I went in that direction is I feel like a lot of times we're not dealing in the mock trial world with students who are trained actors, who are comedians, who are gonna get up and give a stand-up routine. What we do have, though, is a lot of people like you who are talented speakers, who can engage a room. And if you're at a party with them, they're the ones that everybody's going to want to be up front and telling jokes. So how do we translate that into an acting performance with a student who's not an actor and who's not a comedian?
Right. So, you mentioned in AMTA, in the mock trial world, we don't have those certain stand-up guys or those super extroverted people who are going to talk at the party. But what we do have is people who are willing to study and put time aside and, focus on what they want to get better at. And that's always been something I've been amazed with. Any school you go to, it's brilliant students. They're always extremely smart. There's always something about them that you just find so amazing. So with those people and those students who come in and they don't have those natural talents, it's about putting time aside and working to gain talent from work. So, on our team, we had Isabel Leak, All-American witness, phenomenal. Barely have to do any work with her. We're just reviewing the work. And then we also had a Hayden Strong who during fall season came from an attorney and wasn't confident as a witness. And it ended with him having multiple awards as a witness. So the difference is me and Hayden would get together and we'd work on it. So as coaches, it's our duty to put more effort into those students and also tell the captains to put effort into those students. And if you are one of those students, then it's on you to schedule time in your day as a grown adult trying to be a great legend in mock trial to focus on where you can get better. If it's a witness that makes you have to be extroverted, then you have to look into things that can make you extroverted. You have to look at people who are extroverted. You have to find your pivots in this witness outside of practice because you're only going to do so much in practice, but it's what you do outside of practice that's going to make you shine, and it always works.
So what does that work and what does that study look like? Because I think I've had a lot of students who have the work ethic, but they don't quite know where to aim it. And so they wind up just sort of studying the affidavit to the point that they could nearly recite it, but we're still lacking in these other departments.
Yep. So that work comes in with you and your attorney and somebody else stopping it whenever something's off. So you and your attorney can work something out, but a lot of times your attorney's not going to be mean to you, or these other people who's working with you directly aren't going to be mean to you. But if you have somebody where you're rehearsing your direct examination and they cut you right there and they say, that needs change. You have to have somebody honest with you who tells you that's boring. That wasn't funny. That wasn't good. Because the work that you're doing by yourself trying to get better is only going to be good enough until you have very, very critical criticism of that work. So you have to find somebody who's going to be critical with you, and then you have to run that work by them. And, that work that you're doing, that's going to come from your studying online. That's going to come from watching court TV. That's going to come from trying to get your hands on film of previous mock trial. That's going to come from going on the AMPTA website and trying to find videos of the national championship, because consistently, everybody who's great at mock trial, all the great competitors, they have that knowledge. They've done that work where you're studying film. There's not a sport, organization, club, business that isn't studying competition and prior dealings that's in their field. So you have to watch the national championship. You have to watch multiple. You have to learn what works and what doesn't.
And is that sort of where this development that we're talking about comes from? Because you mentioned, hey, you're starting out not the natural talent, but you develop that talent through work. Is this sort of where that enters the picture?
Yes, 100%. I think the number one thing to get into that mode and to really get the AMPTA bug and to really give yourself up to whatever character you have to be is to look at the priors before you. You have to look at those who came before you, see how they did it, and then mimic it.
So how do you as a coach and your fellow coaches too at Notre Dame handle talent allocation as it comes to attorneys versus witnesses? Because I tend to think it can be very easy to look at an incoming crop and say, all right, these 3 or 4 students are the best and the brightest attorneys. That's what they're going to be. And you people are not quite as good. That's our witnesses. How do you avoid that being the approach and actually asking yourself, okay, where should we allocate this talent so that we're getting great abilities in both departments? And maybe even if we want to dip into the attorney side of things a little bit, how do you know when you're watching an audition as a coach, okay, this is an attorney, this is more of a witness?
Yep. So with Notre Dame, they're actually student ran. So with coaches, we get the final piece of the team, and they say, here's your team, coach it. So a lot of times for the auditions, we're not seeing it too much. But of course, during fall season, people want to switch around. And when it comes to allocating that talent, of course, you have your superstars. You're going to know it. Those are your All-Americans, or the people who have been on your A team or have been in Nats and have always scored well. And they're going to be the ones who, as coaches, we have to make sure that they're the mayor of fair. You have to be fair with everybody else. We have to, their opinions are going to be strong because we know where they're going to be on that team. So if we have a witness he's a witness, he wants to be an attorney, we're going to talk to those program captains. We're going to let them know this is a situation. We're going to see if we have room to switch that person out. And if all those scenarios are there, then we're going to work with them fully in whatever position they're going to be in. So I think a lot of times with mock trial, there's a lot of focus on the superstars and on your A-team captains, when in reality, the focus needs to be on those who are trying to find their way in the AMPTA world, because those captains need to be working with them as well and passing the traditions on. So constant work, constant effort to bring our freshmen and other competitors along.
Back when you were competing, once you had written that first draft of the script, not even just a rough draft, like it's honed in, it's a good script. Between then and competition, what are you doing to make sure that your performance on game day is as good as it can be? What were your favorite ways to practice, your favorite tips and tricks working with your attorney to make it happen?
Yep. So I had 2 main attorneys when I was in undergrad. Chris Grant, a phenomenal attorney that practices in Baylor now, and then Parker Lukenbill, one of my really close friends up in Michigan. And I think one of our biggest benefits is that we live close and we didn't mind being together a lot. So when we're together a lot, we're working on mock trial. We're building that chemistry. And with us, it was to a point where when I'm playing these character witnesses, I found that mixing in some improv makes it seem more natural, makes your performance come off a lot more not scripted, makes it seem like you're really that witness. So instead of grinding out our certain points in that direct, it would be studying the affidavit to make sure you have your certain points so you're not getting impeached. Because if you have the direct memorized and you know, okay, I could get some improv here, I could change an answer here if I have a different jury member that this might not hit with, then you need to study the affidavit. You might need to get tested on it. So a big thing we do at Notre Dame is it's almost like a Jeopardy. We'll say we'll have a witness up, Johnny Wycliffe, and we'll say, okay, many customers did you serve before you saw the cops? This isn't a question that you're going to get crossed on. You're not going to get crossed on that. But it shows how much you know that witness and how much you know that affidavit. So once you're there, once you have that script done, you and your attorney have it done, make sure that you know your affidavit to the point where you could go through Jeopardy and then, of course, hit the cross. So the cross is the most important to me once that portion's done.
So we've talked about creating, developing a witness character. We've talked about coaching, practicing a witness character. Let's move on to game day and what it looks like to really carry out what you've done in all that practice and in all that development. I will add, as we shift into this section, that if you're listening to this and you're just wanting someone to sit with and talk to about your witness characters, I'd love to do that with you. I offer coaching to all kinds of teams. In just the last, I think, month, I've worked with high school, AMTA, and middle school mock trial. By the way, did you know that was a thing? Because I always forget that some places that's a thing, middle school mock trial.
I had no idea. I wish I did. I wish I did.
It's crazy. Just last week, I was judging 8th graders doing mock trial. It's wild.
Yeah, AMTA has a lot of very strong talent in the next decade coming up.
Oh, yeah. But you can find the link to schedule coaching in the description on YouTube or in the show notes if you're listening on a podcast platform. We talked earlier, Simeon, about more than anything as a witness, you got to be likable. You can't be annoying. You can't be divisive, back to your concentric circle conversation. What does it look like when a witness is likable?
When a witness is likable, witness has a great smile and isn't afraid to use it on the jury. The witness doesn't attack the attorney. Instead of the witness attacking the attorney, the witness is confused with the attorney because the witness doesn't have skin in the game to that attorney's question if they are likable, if you're that character. I think being likable just shows that you're not trying to win the case. You're trying to get your point across. You believe in what you're saying, and you know the affidavit fully, and that's going to enhance believing what you're saying. When it comes to conversations, you're having conversations with the attorney. You're having conversations with the crossing attorney. A huge thing is when it comes to objections. On objections, you don't sit there with a stone cold face. If you're trying to be likable and if you're a witness who's never been in court before, you might be a little confused by that. You might be doing the back and forth the way the jury's doing. When questions start, you might have to be like, oh, that was wild. You might have to throw something in there that just shows that you're a human, because from opening statements to closing statements, you're seeing men and women in suits talking as proper and as concise and as non-natural as we are in daily world possible with our attorneys. So as a witness, you have to go up there and you have to show, hey, I'm a normal guy. I'm a normal girl. I have normal reactions. I have normal emotions. I'm not going to fight for this. Those are the certain microcosms that you have to make yourself likable.
Now, if being unlikable is the first thing that can sort of tank a witness performance, I think the other thing is being boring. Now, a lot of the setup for not being boring comes through what we've already talked about, the development of the character, the script, the practice. But on game day, what does it take as a witness to be engaging and interesting, and not the witness that makes me look at the roster and go, okay, how many more do we have before this is over?
Yeah. It's a tough thing because, as witnesses, you're going to have those days where you're just not as extroverted and in it. And then you get up there and you perform and you're just like, oh, what the heck was that? That's not me. I know that wasn't my best performance. I don't even know why I did it. So I think routine is huge. Routine is huge. Sleep is huge. A lot of water is huge.
Mm.
Um, to be in that same zone, you have to have your rituals and you have to be confident. And you're not going to be confident if you don't put the work in. So the necessary work to be put in is the night before, is the morning during. So when you're getting ready in the morning, heading to the tournament, you should be running part of that direct out loud to yourself. You should be running part of that cross out loud to yourself. We see all the time when we're in these hallways seeing performers, we see all the openers and closers running their stuff,
Hmm.
in a portion by themselves. You don't see it too much with witnesses,
Mm.
but
That's a good point.
that's something that's huge because here's the thing. I don't know about you guys, but none of my attorneys are trying to run a cross with me that the other team is doing during a break or before we perform. They're getting their stuff together. So you have to be ready to know what's coming, and you have to prep it enough where you're confident when it comes.
When you're watching a witness and an attorney on direct examination and sort of evaluating the chemistry there, what makes good chemistry between an attorney and a witness? Some of the things you need to shoot for as you perform, beyond just, yeah, you're working together beforehand.
Uh, Let your witness shine. Let your witness shine, but still be relevant. So some of your questions have to have you involved to the point where the jury didn't expect it. Henry Lehman, our head coach at Notre Dame, can't remember the phrase he uses for it, but it basically is, saying things out loud that people don't usually see or write down. It's a new phrase that you could say.
Give me an
So,
example.
I'd say, as an attorney, if you say, after that happened, how did that make you feel? I would say, hey, um, if it was something that the witness wasn't aware of and the attorney lets them be aware of it, and that has an emotional change on the witness, I feel like those are moments that an attorney could be like, now that you know that, or now that you're aware of this situation, or something of the sort that they don't usually hear in mock trial, it's going to
Mm.
give that attorney a little bit of an edge. A
So
lot
in
of
other
times,
words, I kind of took two things from that. Number one, something that's not stilted, because I always
yeah,
say it's real hard with direct to stand out because it's just, well, then what happened and what happened next and what happened after that. So it's something beyond that. But then also it's saying out loud what we're all thinking and not being afraid to do that. Because a lot of the kids and the students that I meet with that aren't like my students, like people I'm coaching around the country, a question I get a lot is I'll say, well, why don't you ask this question? They'll say, well, won't I get an objection? And my response is, well, what would the objection be? And there's no answer because there isn't one. Those are the kinds of questions I think is what you're saying can really help that chemistry.
yes, 100%. You explained it much better than me. But those questions I feel gives the attorney a little bit of a shine, but it also still brings that attention back to the witness because that question was engaging to the witness
Yeah.
entirely. It kind of shows us you guys are buddies.
So I want to go back to character witnesses for just a second because they tend to be the witnesses where in their witness statement there is the least substance in terms of facts that help the case. And I've heard it said you don't want those witnesses to overstay their welcome. But there's also this tendency to, well, if my direct is 4 minutes long, I'm not going to score well and it's not going to go well for me and I'm not going to be memorable. Where do you stand on that? Because I feel like I way too often fall into the trap of like, if we have a 4 minute direct, then no one's going to care.
Yeah, and I think that is where we get our lawyer brains outside of the mock trial brains and forget about the performance. A
Mm-hmm.
4 minute great performance can still score well. I mean, TikTok, how long are those versus YouTube videos or
Yeah.
long documentaries now? I mean, the quick stuff, it sometimes works, It sometimes doesn't. But if you have quick stuff, you have to put some bombs in there. You have to make sure that you're memorable. Because if it's not memorable, then yes, your 4-minute direct is going to be forgotten. But if you have a planned cross joke in your cross, you won't be forgotten. If you have something engaging that differs from the other teams, all their witnesses, you won't be forgotten. So if you know that you're going to run a witness and you don't have a lot to say, make sure that what you say has a lot of quality.
Another thing that I think can hamper a good character witness in a round on game day is, especially if you're at the college level and you'll have two judges, someone who is presiding and someone who is just scoring, being funny without an audience can be very difficult. I remember I could not, I used to watch John Oliver a lot, and I could not watch him during COVID when it was just him and a white wall and no audience. It was painful. And so, how, as a witness, when you're up there on the stand, do you get that response? Do you sort of play with your audience when there may not be a whole lot of reaction or overwhelming laughter?
Right. So partially, and shout out to Miami, your team has to be snickering for you. They have to be doing a little bit of laughing for you.
Now, is this including the people participating in the round? Or are we talking about people in the gallery?
Oh, no. Yeah, we're talking about, the witnesses in the back. If somebody has a parent in there, give a little chuckle, help you out.
Okay.
My thing is, and what I love is eye contact is huge in mock trial, but let them see your face. Let them see your face and your body looking at somebody else so they could really get a better view at you. So if you're looking at that jury box and there's only two people there, one person there, look at the chairs in there, and imagine that there's somebody sitting there. Because with me, I would much rather perform. Well, I'd say I perform better when nobody's here. I'm the best actor when nobody's around. So if you're looking at a place in the room and nobody's there, maybe that's when you could get really engaging. And then when you're getting engaging, looking at that blank space in the room, you're giving that jury member time to look at your face and say, wow, look at this witness. Like, they're really talking. They're not going to look at you like, who are they looking at? They're going to enjoy the show.
Well, and I have always detested the approach. And I was going to say you see this a lot more in high school, but I don't think you do. I think you see it just as much in college. Okay, I'm being asked the question, I'm looking at my attorney. I'm answering the question, I'm turning to the jury.
Yes.
I'm being asked the question, and then on cross, I don't even look at the attorney. It's so stilted
natural
and fake. Doesn't
you got to
work.
be natural. Yes.
Yeah. As we wrap up here, Simeon, I want to ask you this. Is there anything about the world of witnessing that I haven't asked you that you wish I had? Or a soapbox you want to get on, or just something you love to talk about with this stuff?
Well, I mean, with witnesses, I mean, I could talk about it forever, but I guess the one thing I'll say that I could throw out there as a little bit of advice for people, and this is something that's worked for me, and I'll tell you what, I think part of it is the reason I got my All-American as a witness. When you're a witness, something that will always work, as long as your jury is going to consist of people from the area, is if you find something in that area that everybody knows about. It's so simple. It's such a simple joke. If you're going to Chicago, you could mention something with the bean. Yeah, whoever's in your jury, they're going to know about the bean.
Yeah.
If you're in Columbus, you can mention something about the Buckeyes. They're going to know about it. When I was in Philly, that's when we had the national tournament. That's when Bryce Harper signed a crazy deal for a whole lot of money. And the case had something to do with a lot of money. And I was like, well, that's more than Bryce Harper's deal that he just got. And the jury knows it. But you have to make sure it lands in those concentric circles as well. Has to be something that everybody knows about. But that is a little bit of advice for witnesses. Wherever you're going, there's going to be something in that area that you'll be able to ad lib and throw into your direct or your cross.
What are some examples of good humor, good jokes? I mean, I don't like saying jokes because we talked about not really telling jokes, but jokes that hit those concentric circles, because obviously niche pop culture references are not going to get you there. Something you saw on a TikTok or an Instagram reel is not going to get you there. What does get you there?
I'll have to take it back to that self-deprecating humor. I think that is something that witnesses, whether you're monotone and you can't really get into it, it really fits across all spectrums of people. And as long as it fits in that intro, I think it could work. So I guess an example would be this year, Roy Boulan. We worked on his direct, and he was a waiter. And to start it off, the mock trial case doesn't say anything about being a fancy waiter or trying to be a chef one day or having Michelin stars. But how we're going to start it off is introduce yourself. How's it going? I'm Jimmy James. Well, tell us about yourself. Well, I'm Jimmy James, and I really want to be a chef. I tell you what, I keep cooking this food and everybody says it's really good. And, honestly, I think one day I'm going to have my own Michelin star. Well, what do you do? Well, I'm a waiter. But, I started off as a busboy and I worked my way up, so you're still into it, but it has that quick drop where the jury's knowing that you're a person, but they still know that you're passionate.
One last question about witnessing for you, and that is, if you have a student who is resistant to scripting, who's more of a free spirit, and they kind of it makes them maybe uncomfortable, the idea, what's your advice there? Where would you as a coach work with that person, and where would you draw the line and say, okay, at this point, what you say needs to be planned and memorized and executed in that way?
What I would do is I would give them leeway on how they feel the judge will react. So I think the only leeway with that, because you have to be on point with your attorney. A lot of times, the improv is great, but there's points in there that you have to get out, and there's jokes that you might have to hit. So if this judge is really nitpicky, doesn't like the jokes, throwing them out, no smiles whatsoever, then maybe that's when I would grant that leeway to kind of adjust a little bit. But more leading up to it, if your directing attorney isn't all the way with the improv and switching things up and not going by the script, you have to do the work and be by that script. I think you only get that leeway based on the judges you get and the relationship you have with that attorney. It's a two-person thing.
Well, and I think too, when we talk about don't say funny things, be funny, that doesn't mean just kind of be loosey-goosey weird and hope that it sells, right?
Yep, exactly. It's about the small things that you can do that make your character ignorant to the situation and the person who's just happened to be involved with some stuff. So I could easily say, yeah, I saw the guy slip on that banana. It was crazy. Or I could say, yeah, I turned around and it was a guy who slipped on a banana. I couldn't believe it. It's those small things that you could just change. Simple phrase that's going to get that win for you. So stay away from the monotone, jump on the extroverted train. It's there.
So, Simeon, every time we have someone on the Mock Trial Masterclass podcast where we do a more long form type of thing, I always ask the guests 2 questions on the way out as an encouragement to everyone who might be listening to this and thinking, well, I'm new to this. I'm never going to get to the level that these guys are talking about. And so I'd love for you to share your biggest mock trial blunder, mistake, mess up in your career. And also on the tail end of that, your favorite, most meaningful accomplishment, whether that's, a specific direct you gave, a specific witness you played that you loved, or an award you won.
Okay, for sure. I would say the biggest blunder is, and that's the thing, you don't forget things like this. So if it happens to you, you won't just forget about it next year. It'll stay.
It's not going to be an impeachment, is it? Because those are easy to remember.
No, it was a mic drop is what it was. It was Serena Grande, UVA legend. We were facing off and I was a witness. And there was a point where in my witness's affidavit, I described this person extremely well as being the same exact height, and I guess the same look as Sabrina Grande. So we are in we are in trial, and she's crossing me up like Allen Iverson. And to end it, she walks up to the defendant who I'm pointing the finger at, and she says, "You describe this person as having this kind of hair, and this kind of height, and this kind of build." And then she stood up next to the defendant and she said, "So you would say that I even look like this person?" And I said, "Yes." And then she ended it. So it really
Oh,
just,
gosh.
I was up there not knowing what I was talking about, but when you're in the moment, that
Biggest accomplishment.
biggest accomplishment um, would have to be downtown. So New York downtown was a huge tournament hosted by NYU. I'm not sure if they still do the down. I know it was a shutdown showdown my last year, but I mean, you're talking 4 different judges per round, really huge scoring system. And then at the very end of the day, and it was a tournament that me and one of my best friends, Chris Grant, we worked constantly, night in and night out for this tournament as a witness attorney pair. I got 48 out of 50 on the ranking list, and that
Wow.
was phenomenal. I mean, NYU, I mean, one of the greatest tournaments I've been a part of. They take great pictures and these huge Empire State Building trophies. But as a sophomore, I mean, it was just something that really made me fall in love with mock trial and showed me like, wow, like getting an award shows that I could do this thing and my work paid off. So I just love to see that happen with my students now.
And isn't it something the first time that you compete on that national level, how much confidence it gives you? Because I remember the first time I did that, I was so nervous because for whatever reason, I was thinking there's going to be some level of competitor I've never seen before, and they're going to come out of the woodworks and have this skill that I've never seen. And what wound up happening was we were all on the same level. And you watch that and you watch the best of the best and you say, okay, yeah, they're great. And yeah, we're going to go back and forth, but I can do this.
Exactly. As soon as you get that little bite of confidence, you can't let it go, and that's what I love so much about mock trial versus sports versus any other venture that you do is mock trial is judged by random people every time you do it. There is no, they got lucky that day. No, you're seeing a random person every single time. And when you see teams and when you see people, and if you're listening to this, if you're fortunate enough for it to be you and you win at that level, the confidence is amazing. And it lasts you, for a long time because how random people view you is how it'll be for the rest of your life. So do your best to succeed in it.
Simeon, I will point out before I cut you loose that earlier, and I wrote this down so I'd remember, you used the phrase willy-nilly, which reminds me of the time that as a junior in high school, I used that phrase in a cross, and there was an objection from the other side. And the objection was, objection, Your Honor, to the use of willy-nilly.
How did he rule?
I didn't even have to respond. That got shut down really quick. Simeon, thanks so much for hopping on. This has been fun, number one, but hugely helpful to me, but I know to so many others who are going to be listening to this and taking this in.
Thank you so much for having me. Can't wait to talk again.